Father Gabriel moved through the cathedral like a ghost, tethered to a place that was both his sanctuary and his prison. The scent of wax on the floor clung to his cassock, a faint sweetness that masked the bitterness seeping beneath his skin. His voice, calm and steady, rolled over the pews like a balm, soothing the restless souls who came seeking absolution. Tourists with wide eyes, politicians with hollow smiles, criminals with haunted glances, they all leaned in, desperate for the promise of forgiveness. But beneath the serene smile, a pain throbbed raw and relentless, like a wound that refused to close. He felt it in the chill of the ancient wood beneath his fingertips, the cold that seeped through the cathedral's bones and settled deep in his chest. This was his home, his heaven, and his private hell. The polished floors, the flicker of candlelight, the stained glass fracturing the dying daylight, all of it a stage for the darkness that clawed at his soul. Every word he spoke was a thread in a tapestry of lies, every prayer a mask for the predator lurking beneath. Friday nights were the worst. After the last prayer faded into silence and the crowds dispersed, Father Gabriel walked alone through the shadowed streets. His smile remained compassionate and gentle, but it was a mask, a lie. The city slept, unaware of the disappearances that followed each mass, whispers that danced like smoke around the cathedral's stone walls. Who would suspect the man who preached salvation was the one who fed on their sins? Tonight, as the stained glass shattered the last light of day, a shiver crawled along his spine. The confessional booth, his altar of silent judgment, felt colder than usual, as if the shadows themselves were watching. He pressed his hand to the rough wood, the chill biting through his skin, and a question gnawed at him. Who watches the watcher when the darkness hides behind a cross? The weight of unspoken sins pressed down on him, a suffocating shroud that wrapped tighter with every breath. He could taste the bitterness of guilt, thick and metallic, pooling at the back of his throat. The faces of those who came to him flickered in his mind, their fear, their shame, their desperate hope for liberation. And yet, he was the one who held their secrets, the one who carried the poison beneath the surface. He wanted to scream, to tear off the cassock and run into the night, but the cathedral held him in its grasp. The broom in the kitchen corner, the shine of sparse furniture, the echo of footsteps in empty halls, they were anchors to a life he could never escape. The silence after the last prayer was a hell on earth, a reminder that the darkness inside him was never far from the light he pretended to embody. As the cathedral doors closed behind him, the night swallowed his footsteps. The city's heartbeat quickened in the dark, a pulse that matched the restless ache inside Father Gabriel. The shadows whispered secrets he dared not speak, and the confessional booth waited, cold and unyielding, a silent witness to sins that would never find peace. The question lingered, sharp and unrelenting. Who watches the watcher? And in the depths of that question, a new darkness stirred, promising that the story was far from over. The wound beneath his calm voice throbbed with a hunger that no prayer could still, leaving the city trembling on the edge of a truth too terrible to face. Father Gabriel moved through St. Mary's Cathedral like a ghost, tethered to a place that was both his sanctuary and his prison. The scent of beeswax on the marble floor clung to his black cassock, a faint sweetness masking the bitterness seeping beneath his skin. His voice, calm and steady, rolled over the wooden pews like a balm, soothing the restless souls who came seeking absolution. Tourists with wide eyes, city council members with hollow smiles, street kids with haunted glances. They all leaned in, desperate for the promise of forgiveness. But beneath the serene smile, a pain throbbed, raw and relentless, like a wound that refused to close. He felt it in the chill of the ancient oak beneath his fingertips, the cold that seeped through the cathedral's bones and settled deep in his chest. This was his home, his heaven and his private hell. The polished floors, the flicker of candlelight, the stained glass fracturing the dying daylight, all of it a stage for the darkness that clawed at his soul. Every word he spoke was a thread in a tapestry of lies, every prayer a mask for the predator lurking beneath. Friday nights were the worst. After the last prayer faded into silence and the crowds dispersed, Father Gabriel walked alone through the shadowed streets of the old city. His smile remained, compassionate and gentle, but it was a mask, a lie. The city slept, unaware of the disappearances that followed each mass, whispers that danced like smoke around the cathedral's stone walls. Who would suspect the man who preached salvation was the one who fed on their sins? Tonight, as the stained glass caught the last light of day, a shiver crawled along his spine. The confessional booth, his altar of silent judgment, felt colder than usual, as if the shadows themselves were watching. He pressed his hand to the rough wood, the chill biting through his skin, and a question gnawed at him. Who watches the watcher when the darkness hides behind a cross? The weight of unspoken sins pressed down on him, a suffocating shroud that wrapped tighter with every breath. He could taste the bitterness of guilt, thick and metallic, pooling at the back of his throat. The faces of those who came to him flickered in his mind, their fear, their shame, their desperate hope for liberation. And yet, he was the one who held their secrets, the one who carried the poison beneath the surface. He wanted to scream, to tear off the cassock and run into the night, but the cathedral held him in its grasp. The broom in the kitchen corner, the shine of sparse furniture, the echo of footsteps in empty halls, they were anchors to a life he could never escape. The silence after the last prayer was a hell on earth, a reminder that the darkness inside him was never far from the light he pretended to embody. As the cathedral doors closed behind him, the night swallowed his footsteps. The city's heartbeat quickened in the dark, a pulse that matched the restless ache inside Father Gabriel. The shadows whispered secrets he dared not speak, and the confessional booth waited, cold and unyielding, a silent witness to sins that would never find peace. The question lingered, sharp and unrelenting. Who watches the watcher? And in the depths of that question, a new darkness stirred, promising that the story was far from over. The wound beneath his calm voice throbbed with a hunger that no prayer could still, leaving the city trembling on the edge of a truth too terrible to face. Father Gabriel's hand trembled as he reached for the confessional door, the familiar creak slicing through the silence. But then, a sound. Not the usual whisper of a penitent's confession, but a sharp, stifled gasp. He froze, breath caught in his throat. The booth was supposed to be empty. He had locked it after the last visitor. A faint rustle, then a voice, soft, trembling, but unmistakably real. "Father, please help me." His heart slammed against his ribs. He slid open the door, expecting a stray homeless woman or a lost soul. Instead, the dim light revealed a figure huddled inside, a young woman, eyes wide with terror, clutching a tattered diary to her chest. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, but what shattered him was the necklace around her neck, a small silver cross, identical to the one he wore. "Who are you?" he whispered, voice cracking. She looked up, voice barely a whisper. "I'm your daughter." The world tilted, the cathedral walls bending inward like the closing of a tomb. The diary slipped from her hands, pages fluttering open to reveal photographs of him, of her mother, and of a child he never knew existed. Memories he had buried like corpses clawed their way to the surface. It wasn't just sin he carried. It was a secret so devastating it threatened to unravel everything. The faith, the mask, the man himself. "I've been looking for you," she said, voice breaking. "All these years, and now I need to know why you left me to rot in the darkness." Father Gabriel's breath caught in his throat, the bitter taste of guilt flooding his mouth. The confessional was no longer a place of judgment. It was a tomb of truth, and the watcher had finally been watched. The cathedral's shadows seemed to lean closer, eager to swallow the revelation whole. The question no longer whispered, it screamed, who was Father Gabriel really? And could the city survive the answer? Father Gabriel's fingers trembled as they lingered on the edge of the confessional door, the wood cold and unforgiving beneath his touch. The woman's words echoed in the hollow chamber of his chest, each syllable a jagged shard slicing through the carefully constructed walls of his existence. Daughter. The word tasted like ash, bitter and foreign on his tongue. His breath hitched, a storm gathering behind his ribs, threatening to break loose. The diary lay open, its fragile pages fluttering like wounded birds desperate to escape. Photographs stared back at him, smiles frozen in time, laughter captured in light. Moments he had never lived, but now could never forget. The child in those pictures was her, the woman before him, and a boy with eyes that mirrored his own, a brother he had never known. I don't understand, he whispered, voice cracking like dry earth. Why now? Why come here? Her gaze was steady, fierce with a sorrow that had hardened into steel. Because the darkness is coming, Father. It's not just inside you anymore. It's out there, spreading through the city like a plague, and you're the only one who can stop it. He wanted to recoil, to shut the door and bury this nightmare beneath the altar's cold stone. But something in her eyes, a flicker of hope or maybe desperation, rooted him to the spot. The cathedral, once his sanctuary, felt suddenly like a cage closing in. Then the floor beneath them trembled, a low rumble vibrating through the ancient stones. Candles flickered, their flames dancing wildly as if caught in a sudden gale. The stained glass windows groaned, the colorful shards casting fractured shadows that writhed like living things. A voice, deep and guttural, filled the cathedral, not from the walls or the heavens, but from somewhere beneath. Gabriel. He staggered back, heart pounding, the weight of 1,000 sins pressing down like a tombstone. The woman's eyes widened in terror, her grip tightening on the diary. Who's there? Father Gabriel demanded, voice trembling but fierce. The darkness seemed to pulse, thick and suffocating, as the floorboards cracked open near the altar. From the yawning chasm emerged a figure cloaked in shadows, its face hidden, but its presence a void that swallowed light and hope alike. You thought you could hide, the voice hissed, but blood remembers. Secrets bleed beneath the surface. Your sins have summoned me. Father Gabriel's mind reeled. The predator he had been, the one who fed on the sins of others, was no longer alone. Something older, darker, had answered the call, and it knew him, knew them. The woman stepped forward, defiance burning in her eyes. We're not afraid. The shadow laughed, a sound like breaking glass and whispered curses. You will be. All of you. The Watcher has become the hunted. Father Gabriel's world shattered in that moment. The line between salvation and damnation blurred until it vanished. The cathedral, his prison and his sanctuary, was no longer a place of refuge, but a battleground for a war he never imagined. And as the darkness reached out with cold fingers, Father Gabriel realized the truth he had buried deeper than any confession. The real enemy was not outside. It was inside him, inside them all. The question that had haunted him now screamed in the silence. Who watches the Watcher? And who will watch the city when the Watcher falls? Father Gabriel's breath caught in the thickening air as the shadowed figure rose from the cracked altar floor, its presence a void that swallowed the flickering candlelight whole. The cathedral, once a refuge of whispered prayers and quiet absolution, had become a chamber of horrors, the very stones trembling beneath the weight of secrets long buried. The woman, his daughter, stood firm, clutching the tattered diary like a talisman against the encroaching darkness. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, met his with a silent plea. Don't let this consume us. But before he could answer, before the fragile thread of hope could weave itself through the despair, the shadow's voice slithered through the cavernous space, low and venomous. You think your sins are yours alone, Gabriel. You think the city's darkness is born from one man's torment. The words struck him like a hammer blow, reverberating through his bones. His mind, already fractured by guilt and fear, splintered further. The shadow stepped closer, and as it did, the air grew colder, the scent of burnt incense and decay thickening like a funeral shroud. Then, in a voice that was no longer just the shadows, but a chorus of whispered voices, voices he knew, came the shattering revelation. Gabriel, you are not who you think you are. The woman gasped, clutching the diary tighter, her knuckles white as bone. Father Gabriel's knees buckled, the cathedral floor a cold betrayal beneath him. The tapestry of lies he had woven around himself unraveled in a single devastating moment. You were never a priest, the voices intoned, never a man of God. You were created, crafted from the sins of this city, a vessel for its darkest desires. The confessions you heard, the absolutions you granted, they fed the hunger inside you, a hunger not born of flesh and blood, but of shadows and broken souls. His vision blurred, memories flooding back like a rising tide, faces he'd never seen, names whispered in fear, rituals performed in silence. The truth clawed its way from the depths. Father Gabriel was no man. He was a construct, a living sin given form, a guardian and prisoner of the cathedral's darkest secret. The woman's voice trembled, breaking through the storm inside him. You're not real? He reached out, trembling, searching for the warmth of flesh and bone, but found only the cold emptiness of his own hands. The cross around his neck felt like a lie, the weight of faith a chain forged from illusion. The shadow's laughter echoed, cruel and triumphant. And you thought you could save them. You are the darkness, the watcher is the watched, the sinner is the sin. The cathedral walls seemed to close in, the stained glass bleeding colors that twisted into nightmarish shapes. The confessional booth, once a place of silent judgment, now felt like a tomb, his tomb. His daughter stepped forward, tears streaming down her face, voice barely a whisper. Then what am I? What have you made me? Father Gabriel's heart, or what passed for one, ached with a pain that seeped through the pores and became part of the blood. He was a lie given breath, a shadow given form, and now the truth threatened to consume them both. The darkness reached out, cold and unyielding, and the cathedral's silence shattered with a scream that was both his and not his. The watcher had fallen, and the city waited, trembling on the edge of a truth too terrible to face. Who would watch over them now? Who would stand between salvation and oblivion when the very man they trusted was the embodiment of their deepest nightmare? Father Gabriel's knees scraped against the cold marble as he collapsed beside the cracked altar, the cathedral's vast silence pressing down like a tombstone. His daughter's sobs echoed through the cavernous space, a fragile thread of humanity tangled in the monstrous revelation. The stained glass above fractured the dying light into shards of crimson and violet, as if the heavens themselves bled for the truth unveiled. He tried to grasp at the remnants of his shattered identity, but his hands passed through the emptiness of his own form, a ghost chained to a lie. The weight of centuries pressed on him, not the burden of a man, but the crushing legacy of a dark design. He was not Father Gabriel. He was the city's sin made flesh, a vessel conjured by whispered prayers and broken promises, a guardian forged from the very darkness he sought to hide. His daughter's voice trembled, a fragile lifeline in the abyss. If you're not real, then what am I? Why do I feel this pain, this fear? He looked into her eyes, those mirrors reflecting a soul both broken and fierce, and for the first time a flicker of something raw and unfiltered broke through the void, a longing for truth, for release. But before he could answer, the cathedral's shadows convulsed violently, as if the building itself recoiled from the secret laid bare. Then the impossible happened. From the depths of the chasm beneath the altar, a second figure emerged. Flesh and blood, not shadow and void. A man older with eyes like smoldering coal and a presence that swallowed the air. He stepped forward, his voice a low rumble that shook the stones. Gabriel, or what you think you are, was never meant to be alone. The daughter's eyes widened, terror and recognition warring in their depths. Who are you? The man's gaze pierced through them both, a predator's calm beneath the storm. I am the architect, the one who shaped the darkness, the one who gave birth to your false self. Father Gabriel's hollow form trembled, a storm of rage and despair swirling beneath the surface. You lied. You made me a monster. The architect smiled, cruel and cold. No, you were never a monster. You were a mirror. A reflection of the city's sins, yes, but also its hope. Without you, the darkness would consume everything. You were the balance, the watcher, the sinner, and the savior. His daughter's voice cracked. Then what am I? Am I just another shadow in your game? The architect's eyes flickered with something unreadable. You are the key, the one who can break the cycle. But to do that, you must embrace what you truly are. A sudden, searing pain exploded in Father Gabriel's chest, a fire that spread through his hollow form. Memories flooded back, not his, but those of the architect's victims, the city's forgotten souls. The confessions, the prayers, the whispered sins, they were threads in a tapestry far larger and darker than he had ever imagined. The cathedral trembled again, the stained glass shattering, sending shards raining like blood onto the cold stone. The daughter screamed, clutching the diary, now glowing with an eerie light. The architect's voice rose, commanding and terrible. The watcher has been unmasked. The sins have been revealed. Now the city will decide who lives, who dies, and who is forgotten. Father Gabriel looked at his daughter, the fragile hope in her eyes battling the abyss. The question that had haunted him since the beginning now burned with unbearable clarity. If he was the darkness made flesh, then who could stand against it? Who could watch over the city when the watcher was nothing but a shadow of a lie? And as the cathedral collapsed into chaos, the answer slipped through the cracks. Lost, waiting, and more terrifying than anything they had yet faced. Father Gabriel's hollow form trembled as the architect's words hung heavy in the cathedral's shattered silence. The stained glass windows bled fractured light across the ruin, casting jagged shadows that danced like specters of the past. His daughter clutched the glowing diary, her tears carving rivers down a face hardened by years of abandonment and pain. The cathedral was no longer a sanctuary. It was a crucible, burning away every illusion he had ever held. But then, amid the chaos, a new sound pierced the air, a slow, deliberate clap. The echo rolled through the cathedral like thunder, shaking dust from the rafters. From the fractured altar steps emerged a figure, tall and impossibly familiar. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Father Gabriel with a smile that twisted the fragile hope into something darker. "Bravo!" the man said, voice smooth as silk and sharp as a blade. "You've played your part beautifully." Father Gabriel's breath hitched. The man's face was a mirror of his own. Older, yes, but unmistakably him. Not a shadow, not a ghost, but flesh and blood. The impossible truth slammed into him like a freight train. This was not just the architect, this was himself. The real Father Gabriel, the one he had buried beneath layers of sin and shadow. The daughter's eyes widened in horror. What is this?" The man stepped forward, each movement deliberate, a predator stalking his prey. "You are a lie, a fabrication born from my failure. When I couldn't bear the weight of my sins, I created you, a vessel to carry the darkness so I could walk free." Father Gabriel's hollow chest tightened, a pain so deep it felt like his very soul was being ripped apart. You abandoned me." The man's smile deepened, cruel and remorseless. "I did what I had to. You were never meant to be more than a shadow, a guardian of secrets. But now, the truth must come out. The city deserves to know who truly watches over it. The daughter dropped the diary, its eerie glow extinguishing as the ground beneath them trembled anew. The confessional booth's door slammed shut somewhere in the distance, a final, ominous punctuation. "You see," the man continued, voice low and deadly, "I am the original Father Gabriel, the sinner, the priest, the man who walked these streets before you were ever born. You, this thing, are the darkness I cast off, the sins I refused to face, and now you threaten to unravel everything." Father Gabriel's hollow eyes filled with a storm of despair and rage. "Then what happens to me? To her?" He gestured toward his daughter, whose face was a mask of shattered disbelief. The man's gaze flickered, a flicker of something almost like regret. "You will be destroyed. Because the city cannot survive two watchers, one must fall." The cathedral seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the weight of a truth so devastating, it shattered the fragile line between salvation and damnation. And then, as if answering some unseen command, the shattered stained glass above them began to pulse with a dark light, the fragments swirling into a vortex that threatened to consume them all. Father Gabriel's daughter screamed, the sound raw and desperate, as the two versions of the same man, one hollow, one flesh, stood facing each other across the altar, the city's fate hanging in the balance. The question no longer whispered in the shadows. It roared in the shattered silence. Who watches the watcher when the watcher is his own worst enemy, and when the sins of the past rise to claim the present? Who will stand between the city and its doom? Father Gabriel's hollow form trembled as the vortex of shattered glass swirled above, casting fractured shadows that danced like the flicker of dying flames. The cathedral, once a sanctuary of whispered prayers and fragile hope, had become a crucible where past and present collided in a storm of revelation. His daughter's sobs echoed, a fragile tether to the humanity still clinging to the edges of this nightmare. The two men, one flesh, one shadow, stood locked in a silent war, eyes blazing with a fury born of betrayal and despair. The original Father Gabriel's voice cut through the charged air, cold and merciless. "You were never meant to exist. A mistake born from my weakness. But mistakes have a way of festering, don't they?" The hollow Gabriel's voice, brittle yet fierce, answered, "I am the reckoning you refuse to face. The sins you buried beneath your prayers and lies." Before the original could respond, the cathedral's ancient doors slammed open with a force that shook the very stones. A figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the stormy night. A woman, tall and commanding, her presence slicing through the chaos like a blade. Her eyes glinted with steel and sorrow, and in her hand she held a small, ornate box, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with a light of their own. "Enough," she said, voice steady, but carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "You both are pieces of a broken puzzle, but the city doesn't need your war, it needs the truth." Father Gabriel's daughter looked up, hope flickering amidst the ruin. "Who are you?" The woman's gaze softened, but her words struck like thunder. "I am the keeper of the city's true history, the one who knows what you both are and what you were made to hide." The two Gabriels turned toward her, suspicion and desperation warring in their eyes. The woman opened the box, revealing a weathered journal bound in cracked leather. "This," she said, "holds the origin of the curse that birthed you both, the darkness that feeds on the city's soul, and the secret that could end it." As she spoke, the cathedral's shadows writhed, the air thickening with a presence older and more terrible than either Gabriel had faced. From the depths beneath the altar, a low growl rumbled, shaking the floorboards. The daughter clutched her father's empty hand, fear and determination mingling in her gaze. Then, with a voice that was both a whisper and a roar, the darkness spoke, not from the shadows, but from within the woman herself. "I am the city's heart," she said, "the pulse beneath the stone and steel. The darkness you fear is mine, but so is the light you have forgotten. And the truth you seek is not who watches the watcher, but who controls the watcher's soul. Father Gabriel's breath hitched, the hollow echo of his being trembling with a pain that seeped through the pores and became part of the blood. The city's fate hung on a knife's edge, and the fragile hope that had flickered so briefly now burned with a fierce, desperate light. The original Father Gabriel stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Then tell us what must be done." The keeper's gaze pierced them both. The watcher must choose between destruction and salvation, between the sins of the past and the hope of tomorrow. As the cathedral trembled once more, the shattered glass swirling into a vortex of light and shadow, the daughter whispered, "Father, who are you really?" And in that moment, the answer shattered the fragile line between nightmare and reality. The watcher was not one. It was many. And the city's darkness was not a curse to be broken. It was a legacy to be inherited. The cathedral's walls seemed to breathe, alive with secrets and shadows, as the question echoed louder than ever before. Who watches the watcher when the watcher is a city itself? And when the sins of generations rise, who will stand to protect the fragile light that still flickers in the dark? Father Gabriel's hollow form trembled as the keeper's words settled like a storm cloud over the cathedral's fractured silence. The journal in her hands pulsed faintly, an ancient heartbeat syncing with the trembling stones beneath their feet. His daughter's fingers tightened around his empty hand, a fragile anchor in a sea of unraveling truths. The original Father Gabriel's eyes narrowed, sharp as shattered glass. A legacy to be inherited. What twisted game is this? The keeper's gaze was steady, unyielding. Not a game, a burden. The city is alive, its soul woven from every secret, every sin, every whispered prayer. You are not merely watchers, you are vessels, conduits for the city's will, and now the city demands a reckoning. Before either Gabriel could respond, the cathedral's ancient bells tolled, their mournful clangs echoing like the knell of a dying world. The air thickened, charged with a presence that was no longer distant, but intimate, invasive. The shadows at the edges of the room writhed and stretched, coalescing into shapes that bore the faces of the city's forgotten, faces twisted in agony and accusation. Father Gabriel's daughter gasped, stepping back, the diary slipping from her grasp. The pages fluttered open to reveal a single chilling phrase scrawled in a trembling hand. "The watcher is the city's sin made flesh." The hollow Gabriel's voice cracked, raw with despair. "If the city is the watcher, then what am I? What have I been fighting?" The keeper's eyes softened, but her voice carried the weight of inevitability. "You are its reflection, its pain and its hope, but there is more. The city's heart is fractured, split between light and shadow, and the one who controls the heart controls everything." Suddenly, the cathedral's floor groaned, and beneath the altar, a fissure cracked open wider, revealing a swirling abyss of darkness and light intertwined. From its depths rose a figure, not shadow, not flesh, but something in between. Its eyes burned with a fierce, terrible clarity. "I am the city's soul," it intoned, voice both male and female, young and ancient, born of every secret, every sin, every hope buried beneath these streets. "I am the Watcher's true master." The two Gabriels staggered, the revelation crashing over them like a tidal wave. The daughter's sobs turned to a scream of recognition and horror. "It's us, all of us." The city itself, the soul's gaze pierced them, unblinking and absolute. "You have been pawns in a game far beyond your understanding. The sins you carry are not yours alone. They are the city's inheritance, passed down through blood and shadow." Father Gabriel's hollow voice rose in bitter defiance. "Then what choice do we have? If the city controls us, if we are nothing but reflections, how do we fight for freedom?" The soul's answer was a whisper that echoed through the cathedral's bones. "You don't. You become the city's will. You become the watchers who watch themselves, endlessly trapped in the cycle of sin and salvation." The keeper stepped forward, her hand resting gently on the daughter's shoulder. But there is a way, a fracture in the cycle, a choice that can break the legacy. The daughter looked up, hope flickering like a candle in a gale. What choice? The keeper's eyes darkened with sorrow. To embrace the darkness within and the light without. To become both the sin and the salvation. But it comes at a price. The cathedral trembled, the vortex of shattered glass above them spinning faster, drawing them into its dizzying dance of light and shadow. The question that had haunted Father Gabriel since the beginning now screamed with unbearable clarity. Who watches the watcher when the watcher is the city's soul itself? And when the legacy of darkness and light demands a sacrifice, who will be left standing in the ruins of salvation? The answer hovered just beyond reach, a wound too raw to heal, a truth too terrible to face, and the cathedral waited, silent and patient, for the next chapter to unfold. Father Gabriel's hollow form stood at the heart of St. Mary's Cathedral, the shattered, stained glass casting fractured rainbows across the cold marble floor. The air was thick with tension, the weight of centuries pressing down like a storm ready to break. His daughter's hand trembled in his own, empty, ghostly, but somehow real enough to anchor him to the moment. Around them, the cathedral seemed to breathe, alive with secrets too heavy to carry alone. The keeper's voice cut through the silence, steady and sure. The choice is yours. To break the cycle, you must become both shadow and light. The city's soul demands balance, not destruction. Father Gabriel's eyes, hollow yet burning with a flicker of something new, met his daughter's. She was the key, the living proof that hope could rise from the darkest places. "I don't know if I can," he whispered, voice raw with years of pain and regret. She squeezed his hand, fierce and unwavering. "You're not alone anymore. We face this together." The original Father Gabriel, flesh and blood, stepped forward, his face a mask of bitter understanding. If you choose to embrace both sides, you risk losing yourself. But if you don't, the city will drown in darkness. A low rumble shook the cathedral as the vortex of shattered glass spun faster, a cyclone of light and shadow swirling above them. The city's soul, the living, breathing force that had shaped their fates, waited, patient and relentless. Father Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling the pulse of the city beneath his feet, the heartbeat that had bound him since the beginning. The sins, the secrets, the prayers, they were all threads in the same tapestry. He was both the watcher and the watched, the sinner and the savior. When he opened his eyes again, they shone with a new clarity. "Then we choose to be the balance," he said, voice steady, "to carry the darkness and the light so the city can live." His daughter smiled through tears, hope breaking like dawn. The keeper nodded, a quiet blessing in her gaze. The cathedral trembled one last time as the vortex began to slow, the shards of glass settling into a fragile mosaic of color and shadow. The darkness did not vanish. It softened, folded into the light, a promise rather than a threat. Outside, the city stirred, unaware of the battle fought in its heart. But inside St. Mary's, a new chapter had begun, a story of redemption, sacrifice, and the fragile hope that even the deepest wounds could heal. As Father Gabriel and his daughter stepped out into the night, the question still hung in the air, softer now, but no less urgent. Who watches the watcher when the watcher becomes the city's soul? And when the legacy of light and shadow lives on, who will stand to protect the fragile flame? The answer was theirs to write. You need to subscribe now to this channel so you don't miss the next exclusive chapter in this haunting saga. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this ending. What do you think happens next? And don't wait even one more second to share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to know how this story ends. Only true fans understand the power of standing together. So hit subscribe, like, comment, and share, because the story isn't over yet. Not by a long shot.